Okay, sorry about that. All right, so outgroups then are a collection of people to whom we automatically feel a sense of antagonism. Like BYU yesterday at the hospital, one of the nurses that came in was wearing a blue scrubs, and the surgeon that came in was wearing red, and she commented something like, "Oh, how are you a BYU or are you a View supporter?" And he was kind of rude about it. He's like, "I think the whole thing is dumb," or actually, I think he said stupid. So I think the whole thing is stupid, and people are stupid for showing any sort of connection or whatever, and kind of made the lady feel a little bit dumb. But where you have the U of U and BYU, when they have matches that are against each other, and you're wearing and I didn't go to either of those schools, and so from a distance, it seems a little bit funny that that you can get, I guess, upset, frustrated, irritated at somebody for wearing colors showing allegiance to the other place. You automatically feel a sense of antagonism towards them, meaning not that you don't necessarily like them. I mean, it might not be that pronounced. I mean, it certainly is. You always hear about during sports season. Just a couple of years ago, there was some guys at NC State, North Carolina State, and UNC, University of North Carolina, tailgating. They just pulled up in the parking lot and started shooting. It's just, I mean, in the two universities, NC State and UNC are like, I don't know, 15, 20 miles apart from each other. It's just a matter of what college you went to, and people feel that sense of antagonism. And you see it here with blue and red, U of U, BYU. So that's an outgroup. It means you don't even have to know anybody to know that they fit in that group, and you automatically don't like them. And so here's the ironic part, is that if you're in somebody's outgroup, then all the more that's going to make you feel a sense of connection to the other people that are in that outgroup too. Like if you live here in Salt Lake and you're a BYU supporter, you might become a lot stronger BYU supporter because you know that most people in this area, I don't know if it's true or not, but probably, the majority of people in this area support the University of Utah. The ironic thing is that it's going to make you a stronger BYU supporter because you're going to feel that pressure on the outside. And interesting thing that happens with groups is when there's a sense of pressure on the outside, groups more vigorously, more strongly maintain those bounds that hold them together. Now, when we're talking about race and ethnicity, this is going to be tremendously important because so much of the racial violence and racial discrimination that happens all over the world, so much of it has to do with where you're feeling threatened by a group of people. And then members of that group of people know that they're under attack, and then what it makes them do is bind themselves more closely together, and the unintentional consequence is that those who are on the outside see that group get even stronger, and it becomes more frightening. And, well, that starts a cycle that when we learn a little bit more of the physical, or a little bit more of the theoretical tools that we need to understand it, we'll see how that cycle starts to perpetuate itself, and then how it results in individual making a decision to commit a horrible act that, without the idea of in-groups and out-groups, they would have never considered. Okay, so let's look at groups in a slightly different way now. There's also what's called primary groups and secondary groups. Primary groups are like if I was to ask you about yourself, like tell me about yourself. You might not necessarily say that you're this person's kid or that person's brother or sister. You might, but if you really boil down who you are and how you see yourself, that's your primary group. Primary groups are long-term, they're informal, they're relaxed. If you think about it, probably some of the worst things you've ever said to anybody in your life has probably been to one of your parents, or maybe to your brother and sister, or maybe your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband and wife. Probably the rudest things, the most hurtful things you've ever said has been to that person. And the reason why you do that psychologically is because you know that that person is still going to be there the next day. You can, for yourself, and we'll talk about a lot more reasons why when we start talking about some of the psychology that's involved in racial discrimination, we'll sometimes want to push really hard against those people that are important to us just so that we know that we can push and that they're still going to be there. That's called your primary group. It's long-term. It's somebody that if you don't talk to them for 5 years, they're still in your primary group. Like I have members of my family who I love and care for very much, who I haven't talked to in years, but I still care about them a great deal. Secondary groups are groups that meet around a particular purpose, and then you take that purpose away and then the group goes away. Like, you go through college classes and sometimes you meet somebody who's like in the same class as you, or he or she's in multiple classes, and you always, as the semester goes on, you want to sit by them. You start to hang out with them. I don't know, you like going to that class. Going to that class partly is because they're there. It's fun, it gets relaxed. And then something always interesting happens that when the class ends, that just goes away. And you think back, like if you think back about your, intro to English class or your, intro to whatever class, you might think of that person who you sat next to who you would miss them if they weren't there that day. You laughed with them, joked with them, maybe hung out with them occasionally. But as soon as the class goes away, they're not really your friend anymore. Doesn't mean that you don't like them. It means that's a secondary group. And sometimes you can't tell until you take the thing away and you realize that it's secondary group, it's not primary group. Meaning sometimes you're in a relationship with somebody, like a boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever, and you think this is the one, man. You think this is it. This is the person you want to be with forever. And then something changes. You don't know what it is. Maybe you get accepted to different schools. Maybe this person, I don't know, gets a job. Maybe this person tells you something about themselves. And all of a sudden, you just immediately see like, all right, this is just done. And you look back and you try to figure out where it happened. And usually what you realize is that it was never primary group in the first place. Our lives, our self-identity is constructed and maintained. Constructed and maintained with primary groups. Secondary groups, we enter into and out of them all the time. Sometimes they're very short, a couple hours. Sometimes they last for years, but they meet around a specific purpose. You take that purpose away, and the group goes away. Now the last little bit of group that we're going to talk about is, there's something called dyads and triads. A dyad is a group of people that's two members. A triad is a group of people, obviously, that has 3 members. Any group that starts with a triad is more likely to boil down into a dyad. And interestingly, when a group starts as a triad and boils down to a dyad, that dyad is stronger than if it started as a dyad. Meaning, check this out. You go to a party, say you and a friend of yours go to a party, and you see somebody, I don't know, say you and your friend are 2 guys or 2 girls or whatever. You go to a party and you see somebody that you're both interested in. Then you go over and you're talking to, you and the person you went to that party with, you go over and you're talking to that person. And then you realize after a little while that they're talking and you're just kind of like standing there. It started as a triad and it boiled down into a dyad. And that happens where you start to figure out that maybe they had more in common with each other than you did. So we enter into, dozens of dyads. Every time you go up to somebody, even in a cash register, and you buy something from them, you pay them, that little exchange right there is a dyad. It's interesting because you'll probably go through millions of them in your life, and ultimately in your life you're probably going to have 1 or 2 that's going to be your primary dyad, like your husband or your wife, or people use terms like soulmate or whatever, but it's the person that to you, that is your whole idea of who you are. It's a dyad, a group of 2. It's ironic because you enter into tons of them, in the middle of a day. But at the end of your life, there's really 1 dyad that you'll probably feel is the most significant or strongest one. Okay, that's it for groups right now. We'll have more on groups probably with video 3, but for right now, that was groups. See ya.